In spiritual consciousness, the idea that something can happen and change everything and make everything work all the time is always with those that are spiritual. There are hundreds of millions of spiritual people in the world, deeply religious, men of great faith who are aware of God, and so no matter what they go through, there's never the sense of dread or dogged determination, you're going to fight something. There's nothing to fight. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to need or want. When you have the delicate, quiet sense of God in your presence, you can always expect something beyond any dream to occur, any day, any night. Now, in accordance with this, in the world as according to all the Eastern philosophies and so forth, spiritual philosophies, where thousands and millions of people practice deep meditation, become completely quiet, they control their breath, their diet, their thought. They can become completely quiet inside. The point is that there are many millions of people, of case studies, if you read the writings of the mystics and so forth, that these states of awareness are not undreamt of, or there's nothing illusory about them. And when you're in them, there is a faculty of divine consciousness. You can call it deep faith, where you can always rise above anything and everything, because the knowledge, the understanding within the heart and soul of every spiritual person is that God has nothing to do with what they'll call the phenomenological world. Your body, your issues, your future or your past. The cosmos itself does not exist. You have a very quiet sense of God within that's so subtle and contrite. You're humble before God. Not that God wants you to be humble. There's so many people in religious arena that declare you have to be a certain way, and the emotional tone of it should be when you're with a great master, a teacher, as I've certainly been and throughout my life, and there's a preciousness, a kindness, a humanness to it. There's no acting out. I saw a buddy of mine who was illumined last night, and it's just so nice to no one knows it, and I'm the only one in his life that knows it. Because he's so humble, so quiet, so withdrawn in a sense, but he's not withdrawn. He's not anything to himself. But if you know that in someone, like my friend Suzette has that quality, and she's very endearing. People think there's something about her that they love, but it's nothing about her. It's something that just is. Your heart is quiet as a church mouse. No one knows you're there. But you're in the church, and you're alive, and you're happy, and I'm sure you're very well fed. Spiritually speaking, you're in the house of God forever. When you have the sense of contrition, contriteness, you're always willing to pay for the other guy's sins. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that enormous? But you have to step beyond everyday thinking and conceptualizing about these ideas. Once you step beyond the everyday, you're in it transparent, transubstantial, beyond the body, beyond anything physical. Nothing in the world relates to this. It's just an isness. It's quiet as the ocean floor. In other words, it's just there forever, and it's natural, and it just is. And so humility isn't feeling small about yourself. It's the unimaginable ability to apprehend the infinitude of Godness, of the state of awareness, which is the first sight of God. It's been called illumination, sudden illumination in the Buddhist schools and so forth. where you just have this sense of, like my friend last night would have a satori. You have it around him and people have it all the time and he's world famous in certain areas, but no one knows why it is. They think because of his artistic or whatever ability, but it's not. He just lives in another place, in another time, beyond time. And not off in the far distance of time, but timeless. You don't even have a sense of purpose in this, if that makes sense. And yet you get nothing out of your life. No one will ever understand you or respect you in the appropriate manner that would make your heart sing. But from time to time, he speaks to us. And when he does, it's as though we're the only person in the world. Because to God, we are the only person in the world. This presence of heaven is always here. That's what spirituality is about. It's not faith in something that might happen at a certain point, or you'll get your bills taken care of. It's something that we began talking about at the first moment of this empowerment session, where we're all sense and comprehend the idea that there is a God, and that God actually is God, and that nothing in the world has to do with God. That's why you can have the thoughts or in the scripture about God loves everyone and so forth. It's true. Just because people are lost, God is not lost. And the spiritual who are among us, who are truly spiritual, are not lost. And they're not mistaken or taken the sides with evil when they can love everyone all the time, because they're not seeing the day-to-day activity. They're looking deep within the soul and the spirit. And they see who's lost, and they can actually see who can be found and who cannot. And they see all the sub-personalities that every human being has, and beyond that, they can see the Godness in everything that God sees, which gets back to the earlier point about the world being an illusion. It's called Maya in Sanskrit, and there are many different words for it. In Tibet, they would say we're practicing, because the world, the phenomenological world, does not exist. Once you're illumined, this isn't here and you're in heaven, if you can comprehend that. But it's 100 billion times more wonderful. And yet you can contain it within you, and it's very hidden, and no one knows it. And if you're illumined, it doesn't make your life, you're not charmed, you're not happy about it. But you wouldn't change it for a moment. You're here on a destiny pattern to lift up those who would be lifted up, to heal those who would be healed, to love those who love, to care, to believe, to understand, to listen, to be with, to be near, to caress, to hold. You're here for these very delicate reasons. And you wouldn't change it for a moment. Even though to the spiritual, your life with people and so forth is 99.999% traumatic, because no one actually listens and no one's actually going to be like, we be with you. I wrote a little article, a little booklet for martial arts teachers years ago called With You. You can tell if your teacher is with you or not, because all my injuries were from black belts early on that would press my body too far in this direction or that direction, not knowing my internal injuries and so forth, and so they'd pull a muscle, forcing me down to do some exercise, and so I walked away from it and just figured out everything on my own. You can tell if someone's with you or not. People in this room are with you. My buddy Greg is a master teacher of martial arts, and you can, there's a lightness, and certainly in Carlos there's absolute joy in his classes with kickboxing and taekwondo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Everyone's happy, everyone's alive, everyone's light and air, because the teacher is with you. They really demand that you succeed. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in a wonderful way from their heart. They know that it's within everyone to succeed. Greg demands that his students all get A's. They have to bow to their parents before and after the class. It's quite interesting to see people can actually discipline our children in this day and age and get away with it and make it more than effective. Greg's students will come back years later after they've gone to college or the service or whatever, or become a world champion in whatever martial art, and Greg's always there with them, and they always thank him and bring the family or the new kids, and that's for 40, 50 years of work, and it happens all the time. And of course, Suzette, just magic. You just take one look at her and know there's a God. And Tim, my buddy, who's, don't want to say what he does, but he cleans up a lot of people's act, and he has this idea of contriteness within his heart that he'll take responsibility for everything, no matter what the cost emotionally is to him. Isn't that wonderful? And yet he actually has what very few of us have in our life. He has power and lives in the everyday society we live in, but he never uses that to advantage, or to protect himself. He uses it when it absolutely has to be. And even then, he takes responsibility. It's a very interesting state of awareness. And he's done it without a lot of this higher end of spirituality, because he chose to live a pattern of life where you're involved every day in a very direct sense with good and evil. So you can accomplish anything with faith, religious, spiritual, and we're talking today about transdimensional faith. It's a state of consciousness where it's not about faith. You become that which you believe in. You are as God is, even though you're in this world, which does not exist. If you're spiritual, you read all the writings in Sanskrit from the Rig Veda from 4,000 or 5,000 years ago in the Indus Valley. That's where the language of the Latin language started, as well as the Sanskrit and so on and so forth. And so much of the beauty we have in our lives today began in that area. Or in the hills, in the valley, the desert, outside of Jerusalem, where the great holy monks there came to the same conclusion and understanding and transparent and transcendent comprehension that if you control your diet, your heart rate, your thinking, your considerations for others, your faith in an Almighty that is the Almighty, and you let go of everything that you think should be as a mammalian creature, as a consciousness. You give up your own consciousness. This is wonderful. This is what is called true love. You can love someone so much beyond everything. It's a state of awareness. It's perfect. It's beyond time or circumstance, but it's not beyond the wisdom of the sage. The sage meaning the wise one, meaning you who care, who have the capacity to let go of all want, need, or desire. In your consciousness, it doesn't mean you don't enjoy your meal, or a long walk, or kissing a friend, or training with Carlos, or listening to Greg, or being straightened out by Tim on the streets. It's, you get it. When something is authentic and real and true in the deepest reaches of our heart and soul, we know it. And people like these, like Suzette and Carlos, who give something beyond anything about the human circumstance. It's just a direct vibration. It's very light, it's very ethereal. It's what a mom has, what a dad has. It's what God is. You're there forever. I can certainly look back and wonder how my dad put up with some of the things I did. And not until after his death did I always felt it, but he was living a life of a very tough street cop, homicide detective for years. And he was much happier a little while after he passed because he had this great experience of illumination. But no one would ever know it because his life was so direct and tough and streetwise. And not until his death that I found out all these, maybe 40 people came up at my mom's death and told me about how wonderful what my dad had done for them in their life. And I never knew one bit of it. Helped someone get through school, got them out of trouble, fixed their business, et cetera, et cetera. We're in the job at the time in the 40s and 50s and early 60s where he was a homicide lieutenant or whatever. He had to carry that weight all day and every day. So we're not going to know exactly who it is or isn't that carries this sense of illumination. But if we have someone like that in our life, support them, care for them, love them, give to them. Require that the heavens are with them. That's an act of will. Greg wanted one of his teachers here to succeed for years, who had tremendous problems, and somehow Greg's will carried the day. And now that guy's just as good as Greg in the beginning, a little in the rough, but there. There's nothing that cannot be accomplished when we believe in God. When we feel God. When we live a spiritual existence. Again, from the beginning, you always know, this is a secret part of the character of a spiritual person, no matter, I know my life the last few weeks has been demonic because there's so many pressures and there's nothing good happening in anyone's life. I would say most influential people in my life have an ongoing health issue with a family member that's so horrible that no one sleeps, and so I feel all their pain all day and night, and so on and so forth. Whereas for me, as a spiritual person, you have the ability to heal, to lift people above their station in life, whatever it might be. But it's very quiet, very secretive. It's the area of faith or divine healing. It isn't doing one of the great miracles in front of people. It's doing them quietly, where no one knows, no one sees, no one could understand that God himself lives in your heart and looks out from your eyes. So those of you who are spiritual have an ability to live beyond the everyday. And this is getting back to the original thought for today of spiritual faith, where in ordinary life you can be so saddened, so depressed, your heart can be so wrenched because of some circumstance, but in a spiritual life you're living beyond, and so you can carry that weight, not be upset with God or not blame it on life, because you know that the world is the illusion. It's a mistaken consciousness. It need not be. So we do as the mystics do, and the monks and the nuns, and just sit quietly, and that'll be the most important, the most powerful activity of our existence. Sit quietly alone at night, read the prophet, the Bible. There are 10,000 great books. I could recommend many of them from a thought. I've been in and out of metaphysical bookstores since I was 15 years old, when I first saw one in Philadelphia, in South Philly of all places. So I've supported many of them through the years, and now it's all available in 1,000 ways. Just press a button and you can be led through a meditation or whatever, and all that's wonderful. Beyond all that, there's a greater wonder that the heart could ever conceive of. There actually is a God. God actually is God. But God's dimension to begin infinitely beyond everything of our life and every thought we've ever had, including miracles that might have happened in our lives. You come to a place of an openness, a breathless wonder. But you're not breathing hard, you're just there with it. You can hear a pin drop on the desert floor when you're in that place. In Sanskrit and all the old Vedas, they would say, not here, not this, not that. In other words, no matter what you think it is, it's never that. It's an openness, a kindness, extended out infinitely. And infinitely beyond that. And you can see this precious place of infinity. Can you imagine that? And you can see infinitely lighter and airier and sweeter than that of infinity. That becomes more infinite, but it's something delicate. It's not special effects in a Hollywood movie. It's actual experience in your perception. When you let go and know it's not this, it's not that. So you always have the ability, the spiritual faith, which is a divine consideration, meaning it's beyond all thought, it's beyond experience. But not beyond the experience of the sage, which is the wise one, which is we who believe. It's good to believe. For every drop of rain that falls, a flower grows. There is a God. We who seek find. We know, we understand, we care, we love, we heal. And though we get nothing out of it, very rarely someone calls us on us and thanks us, and you can't even take it in because you're contrite about that, and you turn that inside out and somehow give it back to the person giving the gift 1,000-fold. There's no sense of need or want or desire when you see Him, the only God. When you know Him, the only God. The great miracle in the middle of all this is God looks on you with the same love and consideration. That's God. That's the beginning of Godness. God gives God's self away, which is infinite spiritual beauty and purity and kindness and truth and wonder and awareness. And there are many dimensions, many different corridors you walk through in this, but you're aware of, I can be aware of my parents, or I can be aware of a great saint that lived, or I can see the end of this world, which will happen overnight, because we know that it can, we who are spiritual. So it's not something big and extraordinary that the world will end. It's like that. It's like a pin dropping in the desert. Because it's not here. It is an illusion. There is a God. You are a divine presence. If spiritual and in the world today, seemingly, and you know it's not here, then you've given your part in divinity up temporarily to be here in this one infinitesimal place in that endless desert. This one place, this one pin drop. And imagine a desert goes on forever, and the pin, it's just a pin, still a pin, and it's dropping, and that sound of it. Well, the world itself is infinite less than that, because it doesn't exist. It's not even a mistake in consciousness. It really doesn't exist. So the idea that the world should end, or that you could heal a friend or a loved one, in their wisdom, in their understanding, in their seeing God. I've held many people's hands and So I'm simply saying, as representative of all the spiritual people in the world, we've all held people. I'm sure Tim has held many, many people in very scary circumstances and protected them and made them feel safe, because that's what he chose to do, the way he chose to serve God. And there's a beauty in consciousness that you gave up to be here temporarily. You gave up your place in this divine consciousness to incarnate as they were, through this portal called birth, which doesn't exist. My mom's here right now, my dad, and we can laugh about it. And I can't laugh about all that I put them through growing up. If you look back on it and you realize your mom gave her life for you, and you don't, unless you really are intelligent and aware and thoughtful, you really won't understand how much a parent gives to their children. We must imagine now what God gives to his children. We're all heroes to God, and I know no one can understand that. I can't understand it or accept it ever, but I know it's true to God. Because we become contrite as God is when we're given this gift of illumination, of God awareness. So all these different dimensions and these different rooms or places of thought and experience in infinity are ours always. So we can step through this dimension or that. You can't tell people about it ordinarily. I'm sure I could talk about the other day with Carlos certain things and experienced and demonstrated certain presences and so forth that are always there that the average person doesn't see. But if you have the spiritual alliance heart, as my buddy Carlos does, you can see them. And there's been nothing easy in his life, but we all come to this place in our awareness where we step away from the world and our bad habits or whatever at a certain point when we get how this dark thing here is trying to involve us in the world. But there is no world. There's no time, there's no place, there's no consideration. You've never had a meal. You have no future. There was no past. This isn't happening. It gets so quiet. You'll hear that pin drop, and then your sense of sound will become, and of hearing will become so much more than that, and you'll hear something more delicate. You'll hear his voice speaking your name. There's nothing wrong with you. You owe no one money, allegiance, or time. Your pure spirit, your kindness, your delicateness. And when you come to this within yourself, you will, by falling within yourself quietly, find a divine protection that will allow you to walk through the many different horrible dimensions of this world. There was a big scary guy that was high as a kite, I guess at Safeway a year or so ago, and just scared the hell out of everyone. And I just loved the hell of him because there was a child, normally, you don't, 3 feet away was a 2 or 3 year old child standing there with the mom, and so I had to walk over and I just fell in love, loved the guy, and yeah, these people, I don't know what they're talking about, I was hugging them, then they go, yeah, where were you? You know, understand, yeah. It was you know, something, you can open your heart so much that you can walk through fire. It's been in the old scripture, a story about that. Or you can be in the streets and all the dangers that Tim does and, you know, not duck when the bullets are being thrown through the air. It's quite wonderful to have faith, to know God, to be like God, to be as God is. And so when you're spiritual and you step through the everyday, you'll come to this place because you'll have so many different experiences every day. Now the same garbage that hits everyone in the world will hit us every day, but we're okay with it. We're not reacting to it. We're certainly not overreacting to it. Does that make sense? There is a God. You're God's expression in the universe. So all we do is quiet our senses, quiet what's been put on us from birth to this moment through this activity of faith, prayer, contemplation, just talking with God. And again, alone at night in your room, or wherever you can. I've done it behind garbage cans in South Philly where I knew, okay, no one's there right now. I can go behind this garbage can in a parking lot. No one's going to see me. And I'll be quiet and be with God. And that's okay. It's more than okay. The world really is an illusion. All those spiritual works from the Vedas of India to all the Buddhist texts and so forth, you're looking at them, they seem a little bit crazy if you're not spiritual. And you're just beginning to understand your spirituality, they seem impossible. And the moment you see him, all that's gone. And all the travail and trepidation that we live with is gone. There is a God. You are as God is. It's simply quieting ourselves, doing any of the thousands of self-enhancement or spiritual enhancement techniques that are available, whether yoga or this or that. I never believed in any of them. I practiced different things with people because I made friends with everyone I felt was sincere and backed up their spiritual business. Done that with every kind of business there is at some point in this life, even the very serious, dangerous ones. And you'll see who to love and who to protect and care for, and it'll make sense out of everything. And the everyday will be taken care of. There is a God. You are as God is. Its original innocence. You are God's hero. If you are spiritual and in this world today, the timing couldn't be better. You're here to do a great wonder, a miracle. You don't have to worry about any details. There are none. God bless your spiritual destiny. This time around, you will fulfill that part in your heart that cares so much, loves so greatly and deeply, that you want your mom to be happy. You want your dad to know it was worthwhile. You demand your child succeed. And all this is in the realm of awareness, of higher consciousness, belief, faith, consideration for the other, and having the strength to not care what everyone in the world cares about, but to see him, the only God. You'll live through it all as you, and gather up steam, spiritually speaking, as you withdraw from it. You're not here to barter with anyone, to sell. You're just here to give away the purity of your heart and soul that knows there's one God, one truth, one you. Isn't it you? Thank you for listening. Thank you, Mr. Escolta.